Hello, this is a mini review about the new Superman movie, Man of Steel, which I just had the privilege to watch. Oh my, what am I going to say? On a rating scale, I would, to say it ahead, probably rate the film 6 out of 10. Yeah, you will say that's a little bit negative, but hear me out what I have to say. I basically went into the movie because Angry Joe said it's such a great movie, you have to watch it, and most of the times I agree with Angry Joe's reviews, but in this case, no, not really. I haven't actually looked on Metacritics or any websites how the movie, the new Superman movie, Man of Steel, is actually faring right now. I have really no idea how popular it is or how it is seen by fans. I have not talked about anyone about this yet. So, I basically disliked both main elements of the movie. The movie, I'm trying to make this as free of spoilers as possible, but when you see trailers, I suppose as much as you can see from the trailers, and from knowing a little bit about Superman is what you get in this mini review. The film is relatively long, I suppose a little bit over 2 hours, and it's actually two movies, two films. The first half we get an origin story in flashbacks, in swapping through time. Superman still being Clark Kent and not Superman is having flashbacks, trying to live a normal life, looking back, and so we get a sort of an origin story in the first half of the film, and the second, a big alien invasion he has to thwart. Now both features, both topics are, I don't know, I can't see them anymore. I'm going to the second half first, the alien invasion. The problem with Superman, both in movies and comics, is, I must admit, I never was a big Superman fan. It's not that the character isn't cool or nice or something, but the point is, Superman is so strong that you really have to bring out the big guns to even threaten him. You know, when you see Batman movies or Batman TV series would happen, or now we have Arrow, about Green Arrow, this TV series. That is something manageable, and I'm not talking about realistic. It is, I mean, something that we can relate to. Superman is a great fictional ideal, but it's not a character I can relate to. I mean, there are some points which try to make him human and aspects which you can understand, but by and large it's a man that bullets bounce away from and who can crash entire buildings just so. And so you have to take out the big guns to make any story where Superman is endangered. Now there would be alternatives. Instead of a giant alien invasion, like Superman is vulnerable to magic, for instance, but that is something so difficult to display in a movie, I suppose. In a comic you could write this in great detail and explain it, but I don't think that a magic threat, which is something more subtle, would really work in a movie, or maybe in a TV show, but not in a movie. The other alternative would be kryptonite, anything revolving around kryptonite, but we have seen that in the past movies time and again. And it's why, personally, I think Lex Luthor is the perfect opponent for Superman, but Lex Luthor doesn't play a role in this Superman movie. This is a classic big alien invasion type of threat, something big that only Superman can oppose. And my gripe with it is, first, I have seen these kind of invasions a gazillion times by now. I mean, seriously, how many times can New York, pardon me, it's not New York, it's Metropolis, but what the heck? how many times can you see big cities like New York seen destroyed in a big alien invasion with big, huge black ships coming down from the sky for whatever reasons? I just have seen this so many times that many of these movies I can't even recall the names because I can't differ between the stories, the names, and anything. I'm sorry, I've seen enough alien invasions like this. Seriously, houses crumbling, cars flying through the air, dust getting down. I know it makes a great, stunning visual effect, but sorry, partially because maybe I'm getting old with 42 now, but I have an overdose of this. Seriously, again, a galactic invasion. Sorry, it was just too much, and there is so much action over action over action. There is no break. There is no humor. It is so serious in most aspects. And this is what I find tragic, but it is a little bit probably the way things are today. It's very much like in the Batman movies. The old Batman movies, some of them were really trashy or had very, very trashy moments, but I loved them exactly for that. They were not perfect. They were not action upon action upon action. There were some silent sequences. There were some slow sequences, there was some dialogue sequences, and I'm talking about the second half of the Superman movie. I'm going to the origin part in a moment, and in this action part, the second half, you have only explosions, crashing houses, coming down houses, and it goes bam, 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 action sequence after action sequence, and it's just this little bit of an overkill where I, at some point, stopped to feel the drama. It didn't really touch me anymore. I can't exactly say why, but it's really like a big overdose of action, not only within the second half of the movie, but within movies like that in general. Now, the other part, the first half of the movie, is an origin story. And oh boy, I'm still blaming George Lucas for bringing this into movie popularity, because after he made in the Stone Age the first 3 Star Wars movies and never wanted to make Star Wars again, and then he got bored, or I don't know, he needed the money. No, probably not. He got bored or was interested. He said, okay, let's take a step back and tell the beginning, the origin story of Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, and so forth. Now, I'm not usually among those who bash the origin Star Wars, the prequels. I think they are not great, but I had fun watching them. I have them on DVD. I run them about once a year. I'm enjoying them, but they're not great because who the hell wants to see the childhood story of Darth Vader? No, I'm absolutely serious about this. I didn't want to know what Darth Vader was like, a whiny 8-year-old kid. Or even if he was a cool 8-year-old kid, it wouldn't make a difference to me. I don't want to know. Origin stories is something that can be interesting in a TV series where you have time to elaborate the details. That is why the Clone Wars TV series, the cartoon series, the later one, the better looking one, that was really cool. It was also sort of like an origin stories, but we had skipped the childhood part, which was utterly boring. And there was time to elaborate, to see all the details step by step. That is what may be interested in an origin story. Or you can write books. A series of books about a sort of origin story, which I found quite interesting, was Jedi Padawan, a book series of, 20 or 21 books about the Padawan time of Obi-Wan. That was quite interesting because it taught us not so much about Obi-Wan, but about how the Jedi functioned in these days. But it was a relatively long series, so you had all the time to elaborate things. Another example which is so-so was Smallville, was an origin story of Superman. A lot of my friends really liked Smallville. I never liked Smallville. I saw the last 3 seasons only with pleasure and fun, because then they got really into the point where Clark Kent began to have powers and use them, and you saw all the other superheroes of the DC universe emerging, like Green Arrow, who was really cool, Aquaman, who was surprisingly interesting enough, and so forth. And the first villains arise. The early seasons of Smallville were not so interesting, because it was basically just personal quandaries of some teenage problems, which I'm sure some people can relate to, but wasn't interesting for me as a fan of superhero comics. Now, but for a movie, I think origin stories just make bad movies. You always have to jump to from point to point, because you don't have the time to tell the entire childhood of someone, or elaborate all the fine detailed steps of a person, like, say, Anakin getting to the dark, or Clark Kent becoming Superman, because there just isn't the time in a movie. I mean, take Lord of the Rings. Now you have Lord of the Rings, and it was a great success, and imagine, would you want to see a trilogy or a single movie going back into the past, telling about the childhood of Frodo? Seriously, who would want to know this? Nobody. And it's even worse with superheroes, because, and even in comics, I'm usually no fan of origin stories. Batman has, I don't know, a dozen origin stories in comics. He's just recently getting the newest version. I know why those companies do is because they can sell their comics to a new generation who probably doesn't know it, though I'm not really sure if that makes sense, because they can buy the old comics. They're still good. There's still good origin stories in those. But a superhero doesn't need a detailed origin story. About Batman, for many years where I read his adventures, I only knew that, well, his parents were killed by some criminal. He trained overseas in some mysterious places, came back to Gotham City, and slowly became Batman. I didn't need to know more, and most importantly, I didn't want to know more. Every detail can just be worse than my imagination. I want him to be an enigma, a mystery. I don't want to see any issues he had, or every, I don't know, the 10 different absurd costumes he tried before trying the Batman costume, or whatever authors might come up with. And the same with Superman. I don't need to see all these details. It's lame, it's uninteresting, it's boring. Who needs to know this? He's Superman. He's the Man of Steel, and maybe what you can do if you have an ongoing series, you can make flashbacks to highlight a few things and give a little bit detail. But I think origin stories are really overdone. We had a Batman origin story in this absolutely horribly boring Batman Begins, the probably most boring Batman movie that I've probably seen. And I know that a lot of people love those Christopher Nolan Batman movies, and I totally, absolutely hated them because of they were so dead serious. And it was the same with the Star Wars prequels. The Star Wars original trilogy was it was dark and deadly and dangerous too, but it was also funny, with parts where you could laugh, and some parts were just trashy but still cool. And these new movies, they're so slick, they're so perfect, and there is not an inch of humor in them. They're so damn serious. And for me, that just doesn't work with superheroes. Sorry. Because, I mean, if you make a really fucked up universe like in The Watchmen, it fits, but even they had some humor, some twisted, dark, evil humor, but humor nonetheless. But those recent Batman films, the same as with this current new Superman, Man of Steel movie, it takes itself way too serious, and the problem is with a superhero setting, I feel that doesn't work for me, because I'm sorry, but a superhero in a caped costume like a bat, or in this strange dress like Superman, is just so out of the world that, how am I going to say it? I can't take it serious anyway. I know it is just escapism. I know it is just fancy makeup, a sort of elaborate children tale made for adults. And that is why, personally, I like the old Batman movies. The first, how many were 3 or 4? I like them much, much more than the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, because yes, they were trashy with the costumes, with the nipples, and I don't know what hilarity, but come on, it's people dressing like bats, people calling themselves names like Aquaman, Green Arrow, and Superman, or Spider-Man. Everything in that is hilarious, but that make the comic part believable. You could suspend the idea that it was just fancy, because it was so fanciful that it was actually again becoming real in itself. But these new movies are so much trying to make Batman and Superman believable in our real world, as if there could be a Superman, he could be out somewhere. And sorry, for me, it's just not working. This attempt to make it more realistic, for me, it creates the opposite effect, that it becomes much more unrealistic to me, much more unbelievable, much more strange to me. And it was a nice action film, but overall the new Man of Steel, it lacked the charm of those old films. I know that I am old-fashioned generally in such things, but I prefer this old-fashioned charms, but then I'm also preferring 1980s TV shows over present-day TV shows, so maybe it's just my thing. But this is my short impression from Man of Steel. If you're a fan of superhero or action-packed alien invasion, house-destroying movies, by all means go into it, watch it, and it's a good enough popcorn movie for an afternoon, but I can't help to feel that the old Superman movies were just much better. I like the old Superman more, and it's not because of the actor so much, but because they had this simple but great charm, which in this over-perfection of present-day movies and this overly serious setting and everything is just not what I feel I relate to. That's all, folk. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. No flaming, please. Each to his, and see you.